Maarten, everyone knows, and Melly we're going to ask Melly to share as well. So just starting that jump in anytime you want to add something, Maarten and Melly. So what we're going to do in this session is basically to talk about, getting ready to write a PhD proposal. Ini have siapa yang sudah mulai satu ya, Romo sudah menulis sudah? Not yet. Oh, okay. So that's good. Okay, so like okay, so let's start with why. I think the why question. Why do you want to do PhD? And I would like to ask people who are going to start PhD, why do you think you want to do a PhD program? It's a hard work. 3 years or more, 4 years, can be 5 years sometimes. Depends on where you work. In Australia it's 3 years, in the Netherlands it's 4 years. Yes. Indonesia can be 4 to 5. I think it's usually longer. Yeah. So who wants to share? Let's jump in. This is a workshop, so we are expecting interactions. Siapa yang berani mulai? Kenapa mau ambil S3? Mulai. Apakah karena harus? Yes, silakan. Siapa namanya?
My name is Wanty from Universitas. Besides this regulation for lecturers to have such kind of PhD, but the nature of PhD is developing ourselves. For myself, the nature of PhD is developing our research skills and then writing skills. So, people might have different reasons why they choose, for example, Indonesia, why they choose overseas. But I would like to say for certainly that I will choose the experience outside of Indonesia. In my opinions, the first one is for PhD, what we are looking for is not the campus itself, but the professor that who have inline research with our research. I think this is a good resource for us on how, for example, to be in line what they expect. I mean, the line of the research and our experience. And of course, the second one is about I can call as the productivity in the working with the research and the culture of the research and the culture of writing research paper. I think those two important cases are very fundamental for me. For example, decide yes, I will go far away from the research in my case.
Thank you for sharing. And is there anyone else who would like to add? Share?
Alright, I am Suharjanto from here at Sanata Dharma University, the English department. I'm going to do my PhD, first of all, to make myself be in line with the need of the university. And someone may deepen the understanding about education and especially to understand who human person is this time. And therefore, I'm going to take philosophy of education to be in line with that. I think that's the primary motivation.
Thank you. So from the two sharing, I'll invite people to share at a later stage as well. But I think from the two people who shared, thank you. You talk about professional development, but also I think professional responsibility, expectation, I think to be in line with the expectations of working at the university level, that you have to have a doctoral degree to teach maybe master's students and things like that. So that's all very good. I think these are the things that you need to know. Like I think you mentioned about contribution to new knowledge. Like when you're choosing research topic, that's what sort of like is expected. That it's not repeating too much of something that is already been done. Important problem, addressing important problem. you have to care about your research. I think that's the important part of it. I think because it's such a long commitment. So if you don't really enjoy the topic that you're researching, it will be a big struggle, I think, to complete. So I think that's one thing. You can develop it, like, over time. And I think with PhD research, the journey is going up and down. It's not like, it's always nice. You will think about, oh, why did I do this? Like, why did I do PhD? It's a crazy idea, but that's the, it's part of the journey. Everyone has that experience. So I think these are the key points. Don't just repeat what something else has done in another country and then do it in Indonesia. That's not a very interesting way. It needs to be practical. I think with PhD, I think you have a time frame to finish. It's like someone said, like it's not really, winning a Nobel Prize. So don't think of your PhD research as something that is too big, too precious, that you have to put on that mind at the end of the day. So that's the thing. Anyone?
I think you mentioned a couple of very important things. The journey of doing a PhD. Almost everyone comes to a point where you think, I'm not capable of doing this. I don't like it. It's too difficult. And that is the moment what you mentioned earlier, the persistence that you need to go on. And one other thing is that all of us at one moment, you're so familiar with your topic that you can hardly understand that it's new for many other people. And so you think that you didn't find anything because you know it so well. You have been focused on only that for 4 years or 3 years. 6 years. But you know that topic so well, you know the ins and outs, you know all the literature, you know all the debates. You're the expert. And sometimes you're more the expert than your supervisor. But you're so in the midst that you don't recognize how much it is. And therefore you think I have to expand. And that is a very difficult point, because if you keep on trying to expand, make it larger, it becomes less. And the smaller it is, the more it is. And those two fights you will encounter during your talk, and during your studies. And just be aware of it. It is not 4 years of fun. But at the end, it feels wonderful.
Is that true, Melly?
Yeah, I remember before I started my PhD, I told a good friend of mine that I was going to do a PhD. He just finished his PhD and he told me, "Are you sure?" Twice. And then, I'm going to do it. And then, when I did my PhD, it's like Maarten says, it's not an easy journey. It's hard. It's full of tears and crying. And then,
This was not me.
she never knew that. And then when I feel like I hit rock bottom, I kept thinking of that question that my friend asked, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" And then I thought, yes, I was sure, and I chose this journey myself. I decided to do a PhD. No one else told me or forced me to do this. So because it's my own choice, I have to finish what I started. So it's just like sort of like the self-motivation that I started this and to finish this no matter what, no matter how hard it is. But then at the end of it, I realized that even though you think that you're not capable of doing it, but you did it. I did it. I made it. Finally, yeah. Each step, it's small step every day, but it's worth all the effort.
And I think it's very important to realize also when you are taking PhD journey, it's also your journey with your supervisors. Where you are supported by a team of people like who have maybe not, I don't know, like I was quite new when I had Melly, so she was my first PhD student, so she was a good one. But kind of like a guinea pig, because that was my one, you see. So, but we had a team of very experienced supervisors as well, so that was very helpful. But I think the important key point is that you stick with you being very persistent. I think that's part of a training, isn't it? I take it as a part of a training, as as an academic, that you have to develop that skill yourself. Rigor in academic research. So everyone is learning with you and alongside you. And at the end, what Maarten said, you should be the expert. And some cases you're more expert than your supervisor. So you have to know that. Yeah.
You said something that triggered part of my thinking. Some of you might want to go abroad. Sometimes it's good to go abroad because you come into a different school of thinking. Each university has a different philosophical basis, a different school of thinking. Just think about the different keynotes here. Professor Isoda has a different school of thinking than, for instance, the Voltaire Institute. And so when you choose, you should not only look at the professor where you want to study, the topic itself, you also should look at what kind of thinking, what kind of educational philosophy is behind that. Is that the educational philosophy that I buy into? And like Wanty says, you are on a journey for a couple of years with this professor. So you also need to find that personal click between the two of you. You need to have the idea, he or she trusts me and I trust him. And not simply crying in your room, but also be able to say to Wanty, but it is so difficult. And that is very difficult to do. So there are more criteria in a selection than just being accepted. Your supervisor needs education students just as much as you need a supervisor. In the choice process, consider yourself to be equal. Don't think, oh, please take me.
I think that's a really key point, because I remember, especially coming from a different culture to Western culture, I remember that my first year when I started my PhD at Melbourne, that was the challenge that I had to overcome, because I think when we are coming from an Eastern culture, you think to put yourself in an unequal position, even you call professor. But in Australia, the people are very laid back. You don't call you need to call them by first name, and it was quite a challenge at the beginning, to change from calling professor to just drop the name, call K rather than professor. But also you have to think that you are equal, and that is very difficult at the beginning. So, but it takes takes a few years to develop that. I think my student from China cannot do that. she always call me Dr. Wanty. It's like, can you just call me Wanty, please? No, I think after she graduated, then she can start calling me by names, but it was difficult.
But one more element of your choice process. I have met a student from the Philippines at one of the earlier ICME conferences. He was studying in Japan, and late in the process, he discovered that the expectation was that he would write his thesis in Japanese. But he was studying in English. And we had an information student who was studying in Germany, where too late in the process he discovered that the expectation was that she would write her thesis in German and not in English. And so when you study abroad, be sure that you cover those grounds, that the expectations of the supervisors and your expectations are the same. And what it sounds, you might need to have that in writing, so that you definitely know, I can finish this because the requirements are the same.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, and I think if you're going to study overseas or even in Indonesia, I think make sure you look up your supervisors, go through the website, and then find out a little bit more. Write to them, introduce yourself. Some people probably won't reply until you get in, but it's a good exercise, because I think when you apply for a scholarship, I remember my interview, they actually would give you a scholarship if they knew that you've done the work, the hard work before, like you already knew what you're going to do, what you're going to contribute when you finish, like what is your research interest, and who have you communicated with someone in the institution where you plan to go. So those are very small steps that you need to do before you even start, I think. Definitely go, when you select your PhD supervisor, I think we touched on this point, match your research interests, find out a little bit more about their publication, their research, past research projects, or their research interests. So I think that's really critical. And at Deakin, we used to have like a panel of 3 supervisors, but that becomes too expensive, I think, to find. And also, it can be quite complicated when you have 3 people. So I think that they now changed the policy. When Melly started, she had 3, but I think now it's more common to have 1 principal and 1 associate, or 2 co-supervisors. So co-supervisors means they are equal, like no one is taking the lead, but if you have a principal and associate, then the principal has to do all the admin work, basically. But they're still communicating. It was different arrangement. I think when I did my PhD, like the principal, I meet with Kay every 2 weeks almost. I meet with Vicky maybe once a semester. But we meet every day. If I go to the tea room, of course I meet Vicky. But like the formal meeting is not the same. The frequency is different. But that is different. Like when I supervise Melly, I think almost all the time it's a group of 3. Unless if people are on leave or they have something else, they couldn't make it, then only 1, 2 or 1, but hardly actually. Most of the time it's 3. Yeah.
In the Netherlands, in many cases, you have, let's say, a daily supervisor. It's not really daily, but you might meet with him or her on a weekly basis. And the habit in the Netherlands is that people are around. You just walk into their office and you say, I struggle now with this. There's an ongoing communication.
Yeah.
And then the principal supervisor is somebody who comes in, let's say, once a month or once every 1.5 months, where you put down more. You have been writing a part of the paper, you have been writing a part of the work, you put it on the table, and they really discuss the ins and outs of that writing. They help you in writing it better. And so there is a difference between the 2 supervisors. When Wanty says 3 supervisors, I get a little scared. Because each supervisor always have their own way of thinking. If there are 3 supervisors, then each of them pushes you a different way. And all of a sudden, it might become a case where you have to choose between those people and between those views. To whom am I listening now? And so you become a play ball in the battle, the academic battle between different views. Now, that is definitely something you want to avoid, because in the 4 years you don't have time for that. So, 2 supervisors is probably much easier.
Yeah, I agree. But I think that's the way to avoid that kind of complications is to actually try to make it the 3 together. And if someone is missing, but it's not always the case, so it might be quite tricky. But I think as well as we manage the expectations very clearly and then work out the plan. I think working backwards is an important strategy that you need to learn actually. So if the deadline is this, you have to finish by 3 years, what is the kind of plan of actions that you have to do? Of course, 3 years is too long, so the first year, what is the plan of actions? First 6 months, you need to do your confirmation, I think we call it confirmation, PhD confirmation. So when you start, actually, you're not confirmed as a PhD candidate. So there's a first year where you have to develop a very strong, solid proposal, and then you have to face the committee, the panel, and you have to defend your proposal. and then if they think that the research is going to is promising, it will be completed within the time frame, then they will let you go ahead, and you just need to get ready for your data collection and things like that. But there are cases when the panel think that this research is complete, the student won't be able to finish. It's too ambitious, or for some reason the methodology is a little bit sketchy and things like that, and it's too hard. They might recommend you to apply for a master degree rather than a PhD, and that was difficult. I think some people might not want to, because they would have a master degree before they do a PhD. So some people might decide, well, I don't want to have 2 master degrees, and they drop out. So that's the worst case. But that's kind of like, I think the confirmation of candidature is a good way to support the candidate to make sure that their research is already being checked. The methodology is sound. Any questions? Yeah.
Okay. Like you said about choosing topic, it's easy, but it's a complex process. I mean, especially we are just a master graduate and have less experience in the kind of research. In my personal cases right now, I'm thinking of 2 topics and 2 different destinations to the campus and the professors. The first one is about the kind of good active citizenship in mathematical education, more in the affective level. And the other side, I'm thinking about on how we can design, for example, fraction division with a well-sequenced activities, and equipped with, for example, GeoGebra, and how we could support that. Between those topics, I'm still now researching the framework on how I could work with it. But I'd like to ask now, in the perspective of the, for example, the candidate of the supervisors, to what extent they see the practicality in terms of time frame and the contribution. We agree about the novelty, yes, in terms of even master or PhD. Absolutely, PhD, we need a novelty of what we are working on, but to what extent the practicality and the contribution of our work on PhD, maybe Celia and Wanty could share in terms of early supervising the recent ideas.
Yeah. Yes, when I just started my PhD, the first thing that my supervisor told me is read. So I read a lot of articles in the literature, and by reading I find many interesting topic, and I felt like I was lost in the literature. Yes, because one article leads to another, leads to another, and then suddenly I thought, well, what am I reading? And then I go back to my focus. And finding the focus of your research is a tricky part for me, I think. Yeah, it's a long, you have to discuss with your supervisor for sure for that. And the other thing is you have to think about your personal interest, because you're going to spend 3 or 4 years doing only that thing. Yeah. So it would be better if you have big interest and passion in that topic. And then and during sometimes that topic can slightly change within your research, because you find, for example, your data showing something else, so you might change the direction. It's normal. I think it's a part of the research.
So it evolves, like your research question might change as well, like along 3 years. It's not a fixed thing, because you're in constant conversation with your students. I mean, like, what we want to make sure is at the end of the journey, when you send the thesis out to the examiners, they won't fail our students. That's the scary part, So it's quite a delicate process as well, like, because, well, I think coming back to your questions about the topic, I think it's very important to think about the practical aspect as well. Like, think about your work and your responsibility. How will your research then can be used when you come back to contribute to your professional professional journey later on? Because I think that's also one of the key question that you have to address if you're applying for scholarship. I think it's like, what's your future plan and how will this program help you to achieve what you are planning in 5 years, 10 years time? Because it's not just that 3 years period, you have to think about a bit longer term. So, any other question? Comment, sorry. Yeah.
That reminds me of at the university when I did this program, winter school.
Yeah.
I
Summer
remember-
school.
In summer school, I remember one session, and that is about your PhD as your identity. So we were asked to think back before the PhD and now you're doing the PhD and after the PhD. What brought you to this PhD journey? And then we wrote like a short reflection, and got me thinking that what kind of research you are doing before the PhD, what kind of job you do, and then how that relates to your PhD, how that relates to your research, and what next? How does my PhD shape my future? That was asked to think of that, and at that point I realized that I was there in Melbourne doing PhD because it's not like it doesn't happen in one night. It's a long story before, like, and got me reflect on the history working. Started with the masters and then the PMR writers when I met Wanty, and then how I built up the network and the work, and which finally brought me to do PhD. And after the PhD, I'm still working with Wanty. So it's a long journey. So you have to, I think it's a good way to think of what you have done and what are you going to do next.
So I think that relates to Maarten's point earlier about the fact that supervisor and student relationship doesn't end. Hopefully, if you could have a good relationship with your supervisor, that's why communication is key. It won't end when you finish your PhD. I'm still working with. I'm not working in terms of writing together in K, but I'm still in a very, very good relationship with my former supervisors. So you become colleague after you finish, definitely, not student and teacher relationship, but we've been colleagues or friends before we started. So I think about that as not the end of the journey, but it's a beginning of a new phase, a new kind of different phase of life. Anything to add?
I was listening to your topic, and when you talk about the learning sequence or a task sequence for fractions, in my mind, it's almost impossible not to make it practical. A requirement that we would have is that you would work with that sequence in a couple of classes in Indonesia, because you're from Indonesia and it doesn't make sense to test that in the Netherlands in schools. You don't understand the language, you don't understand the children, and that is not why you're there. So, in my mind, it is automatically practical. It would lead to that you first write an academic thesis, and the expectation is that after that you would also write a couple of practical articles for teachers. That would not be part of your trajectory during your PhD, but it would be, let's say, the afterlife.
Yeah, I think your second topic is more interesting for me, from my perspective, because it has more. I think it has more practical sense and impact, I think, to classroom. Whereas the first one, it might be a good contribution as well, but it's a little bit more, I don't know.
Okay, on that point, that's what I'm thinking very hard right now. In case of, for example, in the context of Indonesia, although it's under research, now I'm working in reviewing article published by Indonesian authors regarding the current character education in which Kemdikbud try to implement it in the classroom context. Some articles in Indonesia research about that and published in the article. We have collected about 45 articles regarding about that, and the other one in Indonesia, we have two contexts of higher education under two different ministries. The first is religious ministry, and my campus is under the religious of ministry. I don't know exactly. I think the philosophical base of the ministry is regarding the religious study. So everything try to be connected with religions. So now the discourses in our ministry, the religious ministry, is on how campus, we call it in Indonesia as PTKM, religious-based campus in Indonesia, higher education, on how its subject, for example, in my case, mathematics could be connected and implemented with, for example, Islamic values, searching religious values. So we try analyze those published articles and found very uninteresting cases. For example, on the basis of the theoretical number, on the basis of on how the measurement. I think some papers presented in these conferences regarding the character issue. And the first result of our review like to recommend that those articles need to be rethinking about for example, the theoretical income. On that cases, I think as you mentioned about, yes, that's good contribution maybe for the method. I'm also thinking about that. And I'm also thinking about, for example, that kind of research, as so far I know, is not widely researched in terms of mathematical education research to mine, but some are there, for example, prophecy from Berger, the values, and also the newly published in SEADR, promoting citizen, active citizen in mathematics teaching from Karl Marx, about the social scientific issue and modeling. I'm thinking that is it in Indonesia, in case of government policies regarding character education, I'm thinking that would be promising and contributive one to the next year.
I think you just need to find, if you think that is your area of interest, and that is kind of like, what is there's a lack of research in that area, and the government is pushing for it, so you have a kind of like a promising future to stick back to that policy. Definitely, I think that would be interesting. Like, Maarten and I is just thinking, because my PhD is on fractions and decimals as well, so there has been a lot of research on that topic, but still a lot of room for improvement and a lot of room for future research. So it's up to you. Yeah, we cannot tell you to pick one, at this stage, and then find an appropriate supervisor. Like Widjaja at Melbourne Uni, I know has been doing a lot of research on that topic, so he will be very good supervisor if you're thinking of applying to Melbourne Uni. So just find a
What you see if you look at international descriptions of the curriculum, if you compare what people wrote in the 50s to what they write now, is that there is much more emphasis on what does it mean to be a mathematician. So there is emphasis on the character of the person and development. And so in the United States they have the Common Core of Mathematical Practices, where they talk about what it means. How do you see if somebody is a mathematician? Now, what I see in the United States is that it's often used that there is that students use models, and then the teacher gives the models to the students, and then they say, yes, my students use a model. That's of course not the intention behind that. That the students persevere. Well, I force my students to work harder. No, that's not the intention. And so deep down it has to do with character development. And so the combination of character development and mathematics I can make. To do a combination of religion and mathematics is a bridge too far for me.
Yeah.
I find that very difficult to do. But if the in-between can be, let's say, a definition of what does it mean to be a mathematician, and one of the characteristics of a mathematician is, of course, that you're open for argumentation. It's not proved by shouting louder. It's not proved by pushing your No, it is proved by convincing people. What is a characteristic of a democratic society? And so I can see some moves towards building a democratic society and doing good mathematics education. And that would be very interesting to research. I have no clue how to research it yet, but I would be looking forward to your thesis.
Yeah. Okay, I think we should move on and then open the discussion to include other people as well. So that doesn't seem like only one person. So this is just a slide to share about our STEM group at Deakin. So they have the website, and you can actually, if you go to the website, you can find the members. If you click on the members there, then you can find all the professors and the lecturers, the senior lecturer who can supervise their research interests, their past research project and publication. So that's one way. If you are intending to go to the Netherlands after